let's try that. Oh, boom! There you go.
Did you hear that?
It is now. Yeah, it is now. All right, now we good. Okay.
Hi, Shlomo.
Hi.
How you doing?
It's great. Thank God. Really, really great. It's awesome to be back. I mean, I know this isn't really back, but it's backer than we've been in a year. So I'll take it.
It's something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hi, do you have a Zoom link, like a meeting code? Because I'm doing this on my phone too. I
popped the link into the WhatsApp. The link is in the
I'll
chat.
check that out.
Yeah, link's in the chat. You just click on it and you should be here.
Okay, great. I have to cut out a little bit early, but I'm looking forward.
Okay, well it'll be recorded, so you're in luck. Okay, so we are doing this.
You could just talk quick. Talk fast.
I will talk fast regardless of whether or not it's going to be recorded. That I can guarantee you. So we're doing this, of course, in memory of Joanne Tepler. The Neshama should have an aliyah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And with no further ado, let's do Megilat Esther together. You know, something struck me recently, very, very recently. Isn't it interesting that the only two Megillot, the only two Megillas that are story Megillas that actually tell you a story, they're both about women. They both feature women, right? So there's 5 Megillas. If you go to the back of your art scroll, I always use the art scroll Chumash, as you know, the stone edition. That's my go-to. And Megilat Esther begins on page 1252, which begins the section on the Chomesh Megillos, the 5 Megillos, as the art scroll says, which is ironic anyway that you would start with Megilat Esther, because Megilat Esther is, of course, the youngest of the books of Tanakh. It is the most recent. Mm-hmm. It is the latest. It is the latest of all the books. And yet it's the first one. It's the first one in the actual book, because that's the one that everybody wants to, that's the one that everybody wants to read. So, yeah. Anyway, by Hibi me Achashverosh. So it was in the time of Achashverosh. Hu Achashverosh hamalech mehodu v'yad Kush sheva ve'esrimu me'am medina. He is the Achashverosh who is reigning from Hodu to Kush, 127 nations. Now, the beginning of this book is hysterical, because if you're a fan of The Office, so Michael Scott very, very famously says that the most important part of a speech is the opening. So he likes to start every speech with 2 or 3. Now, this Megillah does exactly that. It does exactly that. It's like, it's not a false start, do it again, back up 5 yards. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. It was in the days of Achashverosh. Hu Achashverosh hamalech mehodu v'yad Kush. Oh, yeah. He's the Achashverosh that was Molech from Hodu into Kush, not to be confused with your other friend Achashverosh. That's a very strange way of, like, why would you say it that way? It's very odd. And furthermore, Hamolech does not mean that he reigned, but rather means he is reigning. He is in the process of taking the Melucha. He's in the process of it. Why? Why is he in the process of it? I thought he was already the king. And he reigns over 127 nations. So the Gemara takes all of these psukim and cuts them up and tells you how each phrase is really telling you more than meets the eye. So first of all, Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh, the Gemara says, whenever you start anything by saying Vayihi is a compilation word. It means Vayihi. And Vai, oivei. Oivei, that's what it comes from. Vayihi. It means Oivei was terrible. These were terrible, terrible times. The times of Achashverosh were bad, and that's why the Megillah begins with Vayihi. Now, for those of you who say, well, what are you talking about? Because the Megillah of Ruth also begins with Vayihi. Vayihi b'mei Shvot HaShoftim, and we're talking about the time of the Shoftim. That was a wonderful time. The Gemara emphatically says that you're wrong, because in fact, it was a terrible time. Why? Because the very next words in Megillah Ruth are Vayihi b'mei Shvot HaShoftim, Vayihi ra'av ba'aretz, and there was a famine in the land. So it's a terrible, terrible time, and it introduces the time of Achashverosh as a bad time. Hu Achashverosh hamalech mehodu v'yad Kush. He is the Achashverosh who is reigning from Hodu to Kush. Well, why? What do you mean? Who he is the Achashverosh? You just said it's the time of Achashverosh. The Gemara says, "Hu Achashverosh." He is Achashverosh. He is static. He doesn't change in terms of his rishut, in terms of his evilness. The guy was evil through and through. So who birishato mitchilato v'ad sofo? He is in his despicableness from beginning to end, and he is reigning hamolech. Not that he reigned, but rather he is reigning over 120 nations. The idea is that at no point did he ever feel like he could sit back and just reign. That never happened. He was in a perpetual state of molech, which is again lashon hoveh. It's the language of happening right now in the present. He is always in the process of being molech, of reigning. Now, why is he always in the process of reigning? He's always in the process of reigning because he's not a real king. Achashverosh does not have what they used to call in the old days the divine right of kings. He's not from the royal blood. He's not the Daenerys Targaryen. He's a pretender. Achashverosh is a pretender king. So he's constantly being molech, as if he has to once again reassert his ability to be molech. And Sheva v'Esther Mumei Medina, 127 nations. The Gemara has different ways of understanding this. A popular one is that first, why does it say not 127 nations, but rather 7 and 20 and 100? Because it's telling you the way that he was able to consolidate power. First, he consolidated power over the 7 very, very major centers at the time. Remember, 127 countries. That's a big matzo ball to swallow. Even with the administration of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, that's a massive, massive empire. In fact, it was, I think, the biggest empire the world had ever seen at the time, and possibly since. I don't know if the Mongols overtook them. I don't remember, and I don't remember if Alexander did. I don't know history well enough, but it's certainly top 3 of empires on the planet Earth. So he reigns over all these things, and he got his power first by taking the big centers, and then the next 20, and then finally 100. By Yamim Haim in those days, in those days, I'm sorry, in those days? What do you mean in those days? Of course it's in those days. You just began the previous sentence by saying it wasn't the days of Achashverosh. So obviously those are the days we're talking about. You don't start by saying the days of Achashverosh, and now I'm telling you the days of Captain Spock. Wait a minute, Spock wasn't even a captain. I'm sorry, I apologize. But you get the point. So what do you mean in those days? By Yamim Haim, in those days. So the Gemara explains the days that we're about to be speaking of from the reign of Achashverosh are very, very specific ones. Kesheves hamelach Achashverosh al kisei malchuso. Kesheves, as he is sitting. As he is sitting? Kesheves? What do you mean as he is sitting? Mar explains, because Achashverosh only now decides that he can rest easy and begin to sit. Why? Asher b'Shushan habira, in his capital of Shushan. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Persian history, you know that Shushan was not originally the capital. Shushan is not supposed to be the seat of the Malchut in the Persian Empire. Achashverosh pulled a switcheroo. Achashverosh is taking us into a time of massive political flux. And one of the things that he does, first of all, you're going to see that he turns over monarchy literally on its head, the previous vision that people had at the time of monarchy. And furthermore, he's leaving the ancient seats of power, and he's starting anew. He's building Vegas. He's building Disney World in the sand where there was nothing, and now all the center of this entire hive brain is going to pulsate from Shushan Habira. And now he can start sitting down. Why can he start sitting down? So let's read the next pasuk, and this will all become clear. Bishnat shalosh l'malcho, in the 3rd year of his reign, asam mishteh l'chol sarav v'avadav, he made a feast for all of his officers and his servants. I mean, when you say servants, this is like a major misconception. It's not a misnomer because it means what it means, but people, they have a misconception about what the word means. They think that servants mean the charwoman, the fishmonger. That's not the servants of the king. The servants of the king means the cabinet of the king. I serve at the pleasure of the president. So the Secretary of the Interior is Avadav, and the Secretary of State is Avadav. That's what it refers to. It's not, the guy that goes out and, catches his morning salmon. That's what it referred to. So Kosar of all of his captains and all of his cabinet, Chel Paras Umadai, the armies of Persia and Media, Hapartamim, the satraps, the Saria Medinos Lefanav, and all of the heads of state that were before him. Okay, this pasuk is thick. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a party. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Biden's party was just now. It was just now. Why doesn't Biden wait 3 years into his term to make a party? Well, first of all, because he's really old. But more importantly, because he was inaugurated now, right? So obviously on the day that I ascend the throne, that's going to be a party. In fact, you can actually watch Queen Elizabeth. You can watch her coronation because they televised it. I mean, it's a little grainy and whatnot, but it's really, really cool. That's when you make the big party. You don't wait 3 years. So why is Achashverosh waiting 3 years? The Gemara explains, because Achashverosh knows how to count to 70. Achashverosh knows how to count to 70. And here's the thing. What time period do the Jews find themselves in right now? The period that the Jews find themselves in is after the time of the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, before the building of the second one. Now, the reason that this was a paradigm shift in the way that Jews related to themselves and to Hashem and to the world in general is because they were convinced that they would already be home and be back. They were convinced of that. Why were they convinced of that? Because Yirmiyahu had told them, the prophet Yirmiyahu had already told them that when Babylonia hits their year 70, boom, I'm going to be pokade you. I'm going to take you back. I'm going to take you home. Well, there was once a man who counted to 70, and his name was Belshazzar. Belshazzar was the king of Babylonia, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, and he also knew how to count to 70. So he said, this is already 11 years before this, I believe. So the Jews are in Babylonia at the time, and Babylonia is the big empire, not Persia and Media yet, because they had not yet been conquered by the Persians and the Medes. And Belshazzar realizes that the Jews are not going home. The Jewish God is dead. If the Jewish God is dead, that means that you can party on his plates. Because here's the thing. There was this really magnificent temple in Jerusalem, and everybody knew about it, and that was Hashem's temple. And Hashem had a really good track record for messing and doing terrible things to people who bother him. It's a bad idea to bother Hashem. Just ask the Egyptians, right? We're reading about that now. It's not a good idea to poke the Lord. And therefore, Belshazzar was no fool. So even though his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, but he saw himself as almost a shaliach of God to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Nebuchadnezzar had a relationship with Hashem. The Gemara in Sanhedrin actually says that Nebuchadnezzar was going to say poetry to Hashem that would have been more beautiful than the poetry in the Tehillim, the Psalms, that David HaMelech wrote. The Gemara says that God had to send an angel to slap him in the face so he wouldn't do it. Whatever that means is not important. But the point is, Nebuchadnezzar understood what Hashem was, not what Hashem was, but he understood that Hashem is there. And they had a tremendous amount of respect for the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash, and they never defiled them. They took them, they stole them, they looted them, but they didn't use them. And all of a sudden, his grandson, Belshazzar, realizes 70 years are up, the Jews aren't going home, the Jewish God is dead, open the crates. And Belshazzar decks himself out in the garments of the Kohen Gadol, because, I mean, you can imagine the king of Babylonia probably had some pimped out threads, but the Kohen Gadol was just a different level. I mean, he made Snoop Dogg look positively conservative. Like this guy, the Kohen Gadol, had awesome clothes. So now Belshazzar puts on the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, and they're all eating on the plates of the Beis HaMikdash. And all of a sudden, that's the story about the hand on the wall. All of a sudden, there's a hand, and it starts writing on a wall. It writes 4 words: Menei Menei Takelu Parsim. Now is not the time to go too deeply into this, but the point is, Belshazzar loses his entire kingdom, and it falls to the Persians because he had the audacity to make use, denigrate, to defile the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. Well, guess what? He died because of it. But he did have a daughter. Oh, yes, he did. He did have a daughter, and her name was Vashti. We'll talk about her real soon. And therefore, when he dies, the power moves to Persia. And Ahasuerus realizes that this guy did not know how to count to 70 because he counted to 70. He began at the wrong date. He began when his grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, ascended to the throne of Babylonia. But that's not what the Navi of the Jews was talking about. The Navi of the Jews was referring to 70 years from when everything was destroyed in Jerusalem. So you have to count later. So he does his count, and he comes to 11 years later, and it's the 3rd year of his reign, and now it's time to make a party because clearly the Jews aren't going back. But the theme of the evening, ladies and gentlemen, is that all these foreign powers, all these massive emperor kings, whether it's the king of Babylonia or his son-in-law, the king of Persia, they're all making parties when they think the Jews aren't going home. And that's a hard thing to understand because, Jews always, it's like whenever you read, you open up your newspaper. No one reads newspapers anymore, but you open up your virtual newspaper and you see whatever the 4 headlines are. And of course, it's anti-Semitism. It's anti-Semitism. It's an article about butter. It doesn't matter. Anti-Semitism. Those anti-Semites. The way that we see things through a lens of, oh, they hate us. They're trying to kill us all the time. But you have to admit, it seems a little bit crazy to think that everybody makes parties only when the Jews aren't going back. That seems ridiculous. First with Belshazzar, the Babylonians, and then afterwards with the Persians. And the truth is, of course, that no, they're absolutely obsessed with Jews. We're not crazy. I mean, we might be crazy, but they were 100% obsessed with keeping the Jews inside their empire. and assimilating them. The same thing like Paro was, like we saw in the beginning of Shemos when he says, which means that Paro says to his courtiers, we have to be careful and start outthinking the Jews, lest they become multitudinous. And it will be that if there's a war, they will add to our enemies and they'll fight us. Allah min haaretz. Allah min haaretz means to go up in the land. So even though many of the Rishonim explain Allah min haaretz is really euphemistic, and he's saying that they'll kick us out of our own land, but people don't want to say that, right? They don't want to say, bad things, poo, give tzedakah, knock on wood. So instead he says, Allah min haaretz, that he'll go out. But the simple understanding of the words mean the Jews are going to fight and they're going to leave. And Paro doesn't want to have he doesn't want the Jews to leave. No one wants the Jews to leave. So Belshazzar wants the Jews to stay in Nineveh, and Achashverosh wants the Jews to stay in Persia, and the Americans might even want the Jews to stay in Brooklyn. Same kind of thing. So now that they're not going back, he knows how to count, and he is going to take a party in the 3rd year of his reign. Now you'll notice who comes first: the satraps, the kings, or the military. He puts the military first. Isn't that strange? Chel paras umadai? Turns out it's not strange at all, because we said that he got his 7 nations and then 20 nations and 100 nations by force of arms. So naturally, his closest allies are the army, and he was in fact a captain in the Persian army. So those are his boys, and they go first. Beharoso, pasuk dale, beharoso is osher kavod malchuso, be'esikar tiferes kedula. So yamim rabim shmonim u'ma'as yom. And he was doing this to show off the richness and the honor of his kingship and the beauty and majesty of his greatness for many days, 180 days. And there's an unbelievable Vilna Gaon over here. You have to read, there are 2 books. You have to read the Gra in the Megillah and you have to read the Maharal in the Megillah. You absolutely have to do those 2 things. Like before you die, you got to do that. So the Gra says, there are 6 different levels of grandeur that Achashverosh is showing off. Because it says, Osher Kvod Machuso, Yikar Tiferes Geduloso. 6. Says the Vilna Gaon, every single day, Achashverosh would pull out 6 different wondrous, impossible things to wow the crowd for 180 days. For 180 days, 6 different levels of blow your mind. Oh my gosh, can you imagine this? Well, again, he's sitting on the keys to the kingdom of the Persian Empire. But here's the Vilna Gaon goes another step. He says, Chazal tell us that Nebuchadnezzar, who remember, Achashverosh had ultimately conquered the heir of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had 1,080 secret treasure houses that were hidden, and Achashverosh found all of them. Vilna Gaon says, well, so you got 180 days, and you got 1,080 treasure houses. So there must be some kind of connection there, right? But you're not now, because you're kind of off. You're off by a lot, right? You're off by an order of magnitude. But says the Vilna Gaon, if he's showing off 6 different things every single day, what's 6 times 180? 1,080. So he says he basically popped off the vault doors of Nebuchadnezzar's incredible, Monte Cristo grotto subterranean awesomeness and showed it off to everybody. Furthermore, the Gemara explains that the words Yikar and Tiferes occur only by the Kohen Gadol, which shows you that Achashverosh was doing the very same thing that Belshazzar had done, and he too was wearing the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Now, and at the end of these days, after these days of hoity-toity, muckety-mucks, now he's making a second party. And this is for all the people in the capital of Shushan. Limigadol va'ad katan, whether they be great, whether they be small, it doesn't matter. Mishtet shivas yamim, a 7-day party. Bachatzar ginas bisan hamelech. Now, ginas bisan hamelech means the court of the garden of the palace. Well, which one is it? Is it the court? Is it the garden? Or is it the palace? So the Gemara says, there are 2, this is machlokas actually. Rav and Shmuel. One says that the people who are super duper Federation level 5 Lion of Judah get to sit in the palace. And then for the people that are only they only gave $18,000 this year, but it wasn't a 5-year commitment, they get to sit in the garden. And then for the people who cheaped out and they bought the $180 ticket, but they really bought a whole table and they came with their cousin, they sit out in the garden. That's what one says. The other says, no, that's impossible. That's impossible because the whole purpose of Achashverosh doing this over here, he's a humanitarian. He is a populist. Achashverosh, in fact, seriously, I know it might be too soon. I'm sorry, but Achashverosh is a bit Trumpian in a few different ways. Like you have to see that. You have to see that, right? In terms of the way that he conducts himself, especially vis-a-vis women, the way that he unbelievable. You'll see parallels more and more as the Megillah goes on. Like I don't think you can. It's not possible to ignore it. Like you can't unsee it. So here he is, and he says this party's for everybody. This party's for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're really important. It doesn't matter if you're rich. You could roll up in the Maybach or you can take an Uber. It doesn't matter. You're invited. And therefore, the other one says it just means that they thought that everyone would be able to sit in the courtyard. Remember, the courtyard of the king of Persia was probably the size of, 6 shopping malls, but it wasn't enough because so many people came. They kept coming from downtown, from uptown, from midtown. They're coming. And then it spilled over into the garden. And finally, it spills over into the palace. But the point is, you see, he's opening up the palace doors for all the people. Migadol va'ad katan, it doesn't matter, for 7 days. Chur karpas uscheles, achuz b'chavli butz v'argaman, aglili chesef amudei sheish. The pasuk in pasuk vav is describing to you the beauty, the greatness, the blow your mind wealth of the Persian Empire. Now, if you read it, you're going to see it's hangings of white cotton and blue wool and cords of linen and purple wool and silver rods and marble pillars and couches of gold and pavement of green and onyx and marble and yada, yada, yada. And all that is 100% true. But it's not just that. The Gemara says that each one of these words is actually referring to many layers of meaning. And you're going to learn his politics. You're going to learn his politics from the party. Why? Because dar v'sochares, says the Gemara, dar is a language of Jeror. Jeror is what we say by Yovel. It means liberty. It means throwing away bills and debts. Dar v'sochares means Jeror and Sachor. Says the Gemara, he created a free trade zone. Achashverosh said, I'm not going to charge you import duties. Everybody can go and do trade and money however they want anywhere in the empire. Remember, the empire was basically the known world at the time. So that means that regardless of where you were, can you imagine the financial implications? Like cross-country is a majorly popular move. It was a hugely popular move. So not only is he bringing in all the people and saying, hey guys, I'm the king, but I'm your bro. You can come check out my jacuzzi. He's very a man of the people at the second party, but also he's enabling everybody to make a living. It's not a protectionist racket. It's like every time I go to Israel, I am reminded of the fact, every single time I go to Israel, I'm reminded of the fact that you're not allowed to even bring your American barbecue grill with you to Israel. You can't do that. There's one guy in Israel, I'm serious, this is a true story. There's one dude in Israel, and he has the license to import gas grills. Do you understand? Like if I make Aliyah today, I can't bring my Weber. That's unbelievable. So Achashverosh is like, no, that's horrible. That's corrupt. You can't do that. The Israeli government was not nearly as humanitarian as Achashverosh is. And therefore, he says, Dar v'socharos, everybody can do business however they want. It's going to be wonderful. V'ashkos b'chlei zahav, and the drinking was done in golden goblets, which, by the way, makes you think a little bit, because anybody who drinks wine knows you don't want to drink wine out of a metal cup anyway. It's better with glass. But the point is he's showing off. V'chelim mikelim shonim. And the vessels were unique, a different kind of vessel. Says the Gemara, what do you mean kelim shonim, different kind of vessels? It's the plates. He's eating on the plates of the Beis HaMikdash. V'yein malchus rav kiyad hamelech. And man, the wine, it flowed like the greatest smorgasbord you've ever seen in your life on crack. V'hashasiyach hadas ein ones. And the drinking, as you wish. Nobody's going to force you. No one's going to force you to drink. Because the king had commanded the maitre d' that everyone in this party should feel 100% at ease. And ish va'ish, man and man, there's only 2 people in the Megillah who are called ish. One is ish Yehudi, referring to Mordechai, and the other one is ish tsar va'oyev, referring to Haman. And therefore, the Gemara says that at this party, Achashverosh went out of his way to make sure that everybody's comfortable, even Mordechai and Haman. It's very hard to get Mordechai and Haman to be comfortable at the same parties. Like, you can imagine, Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders don't go out to dinner much. It's just, right? They might respect each other, but they're not having dinner because who would pay for the dinner? It would never work. So anyway, here, he's making sure that everybody's very, very happy. And the Gemara goes even further, and it says that everyone got wine that was older than they were. Can you imagine? Everyone got wine that was older than they were. I'd be drinking 40-year-old wine. Well, at least 39-year-old wine anyway. That's amazing. That's amazing. Give me like a 40-year-old Balvenie. I'm taking that home. That's an unbelievable party. Now, Gam Vashti Hamalka Asta Mishtei Nashim. Beis Hamalchus Asher Lamelech Achashverosh. You know, Vashti the queen also made a party for the women folk in the palace of Achashverosh. Also, Vashti made a party. You think Vashti's party was less opulent than Achashverosh's party? So Gemara says, oh, I'll tell you what also Vashti made a party means. Also Vashti made a party means that Vashti and Achashverosh had exactly the same idea of where this party was going. They had exactly the right idea and the same idea of where this party was going. Achashverosh wanted this party to become a drunken orgy, and Vashti wanted this party to become a drunken orgy. And in fact, they had made up already amongst themselves that there was going to be quite the show put on at this party. This was going to be the party to end all parties. And we're going to see how this goes down. So also Vashti was every bit as much invested in this in the royal palace, so that there could be finally a breaking down of borders. And by the third act, everybody can let their hair down, so to speak. On the seventh day, when the king was quite drunk, Omar he said to Mehuman Bizta Charvona Bigsa Avaxa Zesar and Charkas, Shivasa Sorisim Hamishorsim Espnei Amelech Achashverosh, the seven servants who serve the king. Again, you hear servant and you think, oh, page boy with a tissue to pull out whenever he sneezes. No. These are the 7 dudes that are around him all the time. It's the Lord Privy. But you know what the Lord Privy means? You should look this up. This is so cool. The Lord Privy was the one who would spend time with the king when he was on the toilet. That's the Lord Privy. Privy is in from private, so the privy chamber. But the point is, do you understand how high-ranking you are? Because the king, they didn't have Archie comic books or iPhones. There's no Facebook. So what's the king supposed to do in the toilet? The answer is he's got the Lord Privy. Many deals were signed, sealed, and delivered in the John. So these are the guys that are with him all the time. These are really powerful people. These 7. These 7 are very powerful people. You say to yourself, why do you have to tell me all their names? They're not significant. Can I tell you? Can I give you a little bit of a foreshadow over here? Check out their names. It's really cool because some of the names become very, very important later on. Mehuman, Bizisa, Charvona, Bigsa, Avagsa, Zesar, and Karkas. You're going to meet Charvona again later. Don't forget his name. But there's another guy that you're going to meet later that you never noticed before, and his name is Bigsa. His name is Bigsa. Who's Bigsa? Oh, I think he's Big Son. Oh, I think he's Big Time. That's what I think. And I'll show you why I think that a little bit later. But he's gonna have an attempted coup on King Ahasuerus. Hold that on the shelf. So he says these 7 guys, to bring Vashti the queen in front of the king in her crown. To show the people and the officers and the important people her beauty, because she was smoking hot. Now here's the thing. Everybody knows, even my kindergartner knows, that when they said to bring Vashti in her crown, it means exactly that. Bring Vashti solamente in her crown, nothing else. Now remember, we said that Vashti was all about that. Vashti was ready for this. And the Gemara says, what do you think guys start talking about when they're drinking? This is, well, it depends. There's what Jews talk about when they're drinking, and there's what pagans talk about when they're drinking. When Jews are drinking, they talk about Torah. And if you don't believe me, you should drink with some Jews. But the pagans, when they drink, they talk about girls. So who was at this party? Everybody's at this party. It's the greatest party in the world, man. It's great. Everybody's at the party. So Gemara says the Indians were like, oh, the Indian women, the greatest women in the world. And meanwhile, the Eritreans were like, my dog. No, the Eritrean women will blow your mind. And then the Persian guy was like, you do not know of what you speak. the Persian women are the greatest women. And then the Chicagoans got onto this, and then the Canadians, and then the Micronesians. And everybody's talking. Meanwhile, Achashverosh just sitting there waiting for it. And he goes, you guys ain't seen nothing. You want to see something? Why don't you check out my girl? She's Babylonian. Now, the Gemara says that Vashti was one of the most beautiful women who ever lived. So don't doubt it. If the Gemara goes out of its way to tell you that, probably true. Now you say, but what were the odds? That the princess of Babylonia would be the most beautiful woman in the world? Oh, gee, I don't know. I mean, she's bred for generations to the most beautiful women in the harem of the king of Babylonia. So you can't be just like, listen. I'm not. I don't have a degree in eugenics, but I would have to imagine that would play some role in creating beautiful people. So see, he says, you guys have not seen nothing yet. And he goes, hey, guys, come here. Go tell Vashti the queen that she should come here and do a little dance for everybody. Now, Vatimain hamalka Vashti lavo bidvar hamelech asher biyad asarisim. And Queen Vashti refused to come, as the king had said, in the hands of the courtiers. Vayiksof hamelech ma'od v'chamaso ba'aravo. And the king was very angry, and his anger burned within him. Now, this pasuk is so important. It's so obviously it's so important. Stupid thing to say. Vatima'ein hamalka Vashti. She refused. I thought you said before. Didn't you say before that the queen and the king both had exactly the same plan? Didn't you tell me that Vashti planned on doing the dance at the party? Well, which one is it? Did she plan to or did she not plan to? Well, obviously she planned to. So why does she refuse? It's right there in the pasuk, baby. It's right there. The king did not ask Vashti if she wanted to show up and dance. The king did not wait for Vashti to show up and say surprise. The king turned to his 7 dudes and said, Lehavi es Vashti hamalka, bring her here. So they show up at Vashti's party and they say, Your Majesty, the king says to bring you to dance naked for his friends. And he said, what? He told you to bring me? Oh, no. That is not how this works. Now, if you don't believe me, look at the pasuk, because the pasuk says, "Vatima'ein hamalka Vashti lavo bidvar hamelech asher biyad hasarisim." The queen refused to come at the king's word in the hands of the officers, because her issue was the fact that she was summoned. Otherwise, she would have showed up. Do you understand how, like, if any little thing in the Megillah didn't happen the way that it happened, the whole thing wouldn't have happened at all. So she refuses because he does it in an insulting way. Now, the Vilna Gaon points out, and this is incredible. So I don't know if I ever told you this story. It's a cool story. So I'm leading a Jewish trip from University of Miami, and we are in Windsor Castle. And I said to the tour guide, why is it that the king's wife is the queen, but the queen's husband is not the king? Let me explain my question. William, the grandson of Elizabeth Regina, when William is king, his wife, Kate Middleton, will be Queen Catherine because she's married to the King of England. But right now, the monarch of England is Queen Elizabeth. Her husband is Prince Consort. He's not the King of England. So I asked that to the tour guide. The reason that I asked him that is because I'm a jerk. I knew the answer. Because king outranks queen, that's why. So that's exactly why. But I wanted him to say it. So it didn't go well. The point is, there's a monarch, and then there's the spouse of the monarch. So if the monarch is the king, the spouse is the queen. But if the monarch is the queen, the spouse is the prince consort. So the Gra says, the Vilna Gaon points out as follows. When Achashverosh sends for Vashti, he doesn't send for Malka Vashti, Queen Vashti. He sends for Vashti Hamalka. He sends for Vashti, the queen. Meaning she's not Queen Vashti, she's Vashti. Why is she a queen? Because she's married to me. Vatima'ein Hamalka Vashti. But Queen Vashti refused. Because Vashti says, I'm not Vashti the queen. I'm Queen Vashti. I'm the monarch. You're not the monarch. You are a lazy, drunken slob from my father's stable. That's what you are. I am of the royal blood. Cut me. It's Argamon. It's purple. My blood isn't even blue. It's indigo. She has the best pedigree in the world. So she says, you're gonna tell me what to do. You're not the king. I'm the queen. You're my husband. Now you understand that? That's a major problem. So when you read the Megillah, in like a very, very basic way, you get the impression that there are, he was insulted. He asked her the small favor of dancing naked for his friends, and how dare she refuse, right? And why he goes crazy and kills her over this. He says, no, this argument, the result of this argument is going to determine who the monarch of the Achaemenid Persian Empire is. It's a problem. It's a problem. The whole thing goes awry in the first moment of this party. So he doesn't know what to do. Like Sof HaMelech Me'od, the king was furious. V'chamaso ba'arabo, and his anger burned within him. What do you mean his anger burned within him? You already said he was furious. So Chazal explained he wasn't outwardly furious. He was trying very hard to keep a lid on the anger. Because how do you think people, remember who's there? Everybody. What do you mean everybody? Everybody's there. Everybody's there. Like the newspaper salesman is there, and the restaurateur is there, and the Pope is there. Everybody's there. So he can't have a meltdown. So it's Ba'aravo. It's within him. It's burning within him, his anger. Now we'll see later on that, just to foreshadow, that the king's anger does not actually subside until the very, very end of the Megillah, where it says V'chamas hamelech shachacha. So the anger of this king lasted for a very long time. He was not able to come to grips with how emasculated he was in front of the whole world at this party. So, Vayomer HaMelech lachachamim yodei ha'itim, pasuk Yud Gimel. So the king says to the wise people who knew the times, Ki chen dvar HaMelech lifnei kol yodei das vadin, because that was the way of the king before the people who knew law and judgment. Das vadin. So you have three different understandings here. You have Yodei Ha'itim, the people who knew the times. You have people who know Das and people who know Din. People often mistranslate Das as religion. Das does not mean, it doesn't really mean religion. It probably is closer to the idea of culture. Like there's something called Das Yehudis. It's not Das Moshe. Das Moshe means halacha. Das Yehudis means things that Jewish women do. Things that Jewish women do. Doesn't only have to be women, but we find it oftentimes in the Torah, in the Gemara, discussing like what happens if a Jewish girl is acting in a way that Jewish girls don't act. Not that it's necessarily against the law, it's not Das Moshe, but it's Das Yehudis. So it means the philosophy, the culture, the way that people act and react today. Who does the king consult? Yodei Ha'itim, the people who knew the times. They knew the times, like they knew what time it was. They were excellent at reading sundials from 30 feet away. What it means is, when it says ace, there are many different words. We've spoken about this a little bit in Chumash before. There are different words for time. There's man, there's sha'ah, there's pa'am, there's eight. They're all different. If they weren't different, you wouldn't require so many words. So what does eight mean? Eight means a time for, a time of. It's not a particular hour. It's not time as in an hour. What is the hour? But rather it's, do you know the time that we live in? That's what eight means, a time of, a time for. That's why probably the most famous sentences in Tanakh that have that word repeatedly are eight lehov, eight lisno, eight milchama, eight shalom. It's a time for this, it's a time for that, it's a time for this, it's a time for that. It's not a time for, it's time for war, it's 12:30, it's time for war. Oh, now it's time to gather in stones because it's Wednesday. No, you don't gather stones on Wednesday. It means there's a time to gather stones. When is that time? It's not when is that time. That time will manifest. It will happen. It will emerge. It'll be there. That's the idea. So when he goes to Chachamim Yodei Ha'itim, remember, he's the big populist. He needs to talk to the people that understand the times. He needs to know how the crowd is going to react. That's what Achashverosh wants to know. And therefore, he goes to the people who know Das and Din. Yes, you got to have lawyers. That's Din. That's judgment. But I need more than judgment. I need spin. I need to know how people are going to react to this. That's Das. The Hakarove love, and those who were closest to him, when it comes to this sort of advice. Karshna, Shesar, Mosasar, Shishmeres, Marsana, and Memuchan. There's Karshna, there's Shesar, Ad Mosasar, Shishmeres, Marsana, and Memuchan. Again, 7. So the king Achashverosh has 2 groups of 7. 2 groups of 7. You know what's really cool though? Remember we said before that the seven page boys, so to speak, that were really close were Mehuman, Bizsa, Chavona, Bigsa, and I said Bigsa is really big son. It's really big son. Well, now let's look at these 7. Shesar. It's a word jumble. Seresh. The 2 people who will eventually, as we will see next time, create a coup to try and kill Achashverosh are Big Son and Seresh. And you ask yourself, like, why was it such a sophisticated plan that no one would be able to figure it out? And the answer is because there are 2 sets of closest advisors, and one from each collaborated to kill him. That's why. And they're hiding there in the words. Anyway, these are the 7. Karshna, Shesar, Mosasar, Shishmeres, Marsana, and Memuchan. Says the Gemara, we are listing these 7 officers in descending order of importance. So Karshna is the most important and Memuchan is the least important. Okay. And he says to them, Kidas malasos b'malka Vashti. What's the right move with this Queen Vashti business? I can't handle Queen Vashti. I need Vashti the queen. If I have Queen Vashti, then I'm nobody. And Vashti even said to him, you know how much she embarrassed him? She screams at the courtiers that came to fetch her. She goes, tell that man that my father was able to drink anybody under the table, and he doesn't know how to hold his liquor. There's no greater insult to a Persian king, especially like a military macho guy, that he can't hold his liquor, that you're the weakest link at the Farbrengen. Come on. It's humiliating. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do with Malka Vashti? Because after all, she did not listen to King Achashverosh, not Achashverosh the king, the King Achashverosh in the hands of his 7 important officers. Vayomer Memuchan lifnei hamelech v'hasarim. And Memuchan says in front of the king and all of the officers. Remember, wasn't Memuchan the least important guy there? We said Karshna, Shesar, Mosasar, Shishmeres, Marsana, Memuchan. Memuchan is the smallest guy that's even there. And he's the one that speaks up. You got to check this out. It's awesome. It's very simple. Very simple. The Gemara says that actually Achashverosh tried to ask the Jews what to do, and the Jews wanted no part of answering the question. Why don't you want to answer the question? Because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. The king just got dissed by his wife. And by the way, have I mentioned he's drunk? Oh, and by the way, have I mentioned he's super angry? Like right now. Drunken, absolute power, crazy megalomaniac monarch. There's no win. There's no win when you deal with a person like that. You're dead. So the king says, what should we do with Vashti? And you say, oh, I think, Your Majesty, I think you should kill her. That's a good idea. Let's kill her. And then 3 days later, when he wakes up sober from the drunk tank, who's he going to blame? You. He'll blame you. And he'll skin you alive with a cheese grater. So you say to him, let her go. Let her live. What? You don't care about my covet? He'll skin you now, today, with a cheese grater. So basically, whoever speaks up, it depends what he says. Either he could die now with the cheese grater, or he could die in 3 days with the cheese grater. But either way, he's going to die slowly. No one wants to answer this question. Who answers? The smallest guy. The smallest guy. And the Gemara says, who's Memuchan? Haman. Haman is Memuchan. And the Gemara says, why is his name Memuchan? Because he is Muchan lepuranut. He is ready. He is prepared for destruction, for problems. More on that to come. Bezrat Hashem. This is just a little bit of foreshadowing here. So Memuchan says, Vayomer Memuchan lifnei hamelech v'hasarim. Memuchan speaks up in front of the king and all the courtiers. Lo ala melech levado avsa Vashti amalka. He gave Achashverosh exactly what he needed. Listen, say what you want about Haman, but the guy was not an idiot, because listen to what he did. He said, Your Majesty, it's really not about you. We know that you are a man of infinite mercy. We know that you would, of course, no doubt overlook this awful trespass from your darling wife, who unfortunately is not within her wits today. Unfortunately, Your Majesty, you cannot pardon her, because she didn't just sin to you, you see. She didn't just sin to you. Vashti the queen didn't merely sin to you. Ceasing to every single prince in every single province. Why? Because now all the women are going to put their men down. We're going to have a women's lib movement. Can't handle that. Next, they're going to want to vote. Next, they're going to want to drive. Can't have that. When they all hear that Queen Vashti, that Achashverosh said to call Vashti, and she didn't come, I don't have to respect my man now. And now all those girls, all those princesses, all those women of wealthy merchants are going to hear what the queen did. Why? How are they going to hear? Because it was done in public. It was done at this massive party. Everyone knows. And it's going to create a lot of anger. If the king will agree with me, if his majesty would only let there come out a royal edict. And let it be written in the customs of Persia and Media that it will never be undone. Notice she's no longer Vashti the queen, and she's no longer Queen Vashti. She is from now on merely Vashti. Vashti wouldn't come before King Achashverosh. And the king will give her crown. Will give her monarchy to her friend who is greater than she. The king will take away her monarchy. Obviously, he takes away the crown. He doesn't just take away the crown. He takes away the head that wears the crown. He kills her. And give it Lerusa Hatova Mimena. And these words echo through history. They reverberate. Because we read in Shmuel Aleph that there was a king of the Jews whose name was Shaul from the tribe of Benjamin. And Shaul was tasked with killing Amalek. And he messes up and he doesn't kill the king of Amalek, whose name is Agag. Keep that name in the back of your head. So there's this king of Amalek named Agag. And Shaul, the Benjamite king of Israel, fails to kill him. And Shmuel the prophet is sent to tell Shaul that he has now lost his monarchy. And that his malchut will be given L'reacha hatov mimeka, to your friend who is greater than you. And to whom does that refer? David. L'reacha hatov mimeka, to your friend who's better than you. Well, now, who is the descendant of that King Shaul? Esther. So now these words, Haman, who's a descendant of Agag, Haman tells Achashverosh, let Vashti's kingship be conferred to her friend who is greater than she. Pretty cool stuff. And then the king's proclamation is going to go all throughout the kingdom, which is enormous. And every wife will treat their husband with respect, whether they are great or whether they are small. And the Medrash explains that Haman, methinks thou doth protest too much. Like, why is he on this crazy kick that all the women and all of this and all of that? Like, really, you think it's like you're so afraid of women? The answer is yes, he's so afraid of women. Why? He's afraid of his wife. Because I'll say he's afraid of Zeresh. Zeresh had better yichus than he did. All the money in the family was from her side. So he's like, these girls are getting uppity. These girls are getting uppity. We can't have that. No, sir. No, sir. You got to clamp down right now. Got to clamp down right now. And it was good in the eyes of the king and the Sarim. It was good in the eyes of the king because he's drunk and he hates his wife, and she embarrassed him in front of everybody. Now he gets a little vindication. And it was good in the eyes of the Sarim because they didn't come up with the idea. So they won't be the ones to be killed when he wakes up and is very upset about it. So they're super happy that this idiot Memuchan spoke up. He'll be the one in the frying pan. And the king did like Memuchan said. And they sent out proclamations to every single country. They sent to each one in its language, and to each people within each country in their language, that every man should be the king in his own house and should speak the language of his people. Now, this is very important for two reasons. Number one, oh, perfect timing. Number one, Vashti, as we mentioned earlier, was the last remnant of the monarchy of Babylonia. And Babylonia was the united monarchy, meaning if you wanted to be in the court, if you wanted to be in the court system, you had to speak Kastit. That was the language. And if your wife was a Kastit, she was more important than you. You're a mudblood. She's a true witch. So Haman needs to undo all of that. Remember, it was a very foolish move that he pulled. Ara is asking them, why did he do it? I don't know why he did it. Either because, again, he's Mukhan Puranut, he's ready for problems, or because he saw an opening and he thought that he could finesse it, which he ended up doing. I don't know why. But you see that all of the other people did not want to take a swing at that ball. So the first thing that you see is he's undoing the greatness of Vashti and the greatness of Belshazzar and Evil Merodach and Nebuchadnezzar going all the way up. The coolness factor of Babylonia has now been undone. Every single language is equal. Every single people is equal. Remember, he's the great populist. I don't care if you're an Indian or a Colombian or a Peruvian. It doesn't matter. You're welcome in the house. Everyone has to talk the language of the daddy, number one. Number two, the thing that's very interesting here that Chazal point out is, can you imagine when you get a letter from the king? I mean, this is a big issue. You get a letter from the king? Holy cow, it's the most exciting day of all time. And you gather the whole family around before you break the seal and open up the proclamation. You gather, and Uncle Jimmy is there, and Uncle Yankee, and Chaicha. Everybody's there. You call the whole family, you make a big kiddush in the shul, and they open up the proclamation of the king. This very, very popular kid. Took 6 months to travel there so that everyone could hear the amazing words that came out of Susa. And the great words of the king are, you should talk daddy's language and mommy should treat him with respect. And everyone's like, what else does it say? is that all? Wah, wah. That's insane. Why would the king send such an asinine letter to everyone in the kingdom? It makes you wonder. But you see, what did he just do to all 20 million people in the empire? He just made them wonder. But we're going to see that later on. It's very, very significant because he's going to send other letters out. How are people going to respond to letters from the king of Persia? Well, the first letter that they got from the king of Persia showed that the king of Persia is a crackhead. That turns out to be very important because the next time they get letters that say to kill the Jews, they don't take it as seriously as they otherwise might have. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, have a beautiful, beautiful Shabbos. I'm not going to do a Chumash here now, but God willing, I will record one tomorrow and I'll pop it up on the chat. So I'll have awesome stuff to talk about on Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you.